But most Muslims are not aware that there's a relationship between their daily prayers and their paying of zakat and performing the Sharia and what they're doing to the natural environment. This disconnect has come from the rise of a very strange but also powerful force that came into the Islamic world in the 19th century, which I have to deal with very, very briefly because that's also a subject for another day. And that is what I could call Scientism. That is a way of generalizing the view of modern science so as to embrace the whole of reality and considering it to be the determining factor for understanding what reality is. This is really what Scientism entails. It's strange that Scientism came to the Islamic world through the back door, and it came mostly through Istanbul and Egypt and Cairo, those two cities, and later on Bombay, other places where there are Muslim, either majorities or minorities in the subcontinent of India, and then spread to the heartland of the Islamic world, to both Persia and the Arab world and inner parts of the Ottoman Empire. Scientism began with the attempt by a number of Muslim thinkers who thought they were very devout and who wanted to save the Islamic world during the colonial period from the onslaught of the West, which was then militarily much more powerful than it, and it remains so to this day, of course, by equating the Islamic understanding of knowledge, al-ilm, with modern science, and saying that essentially Islam is the foundation of modern Western science, and all Muslims have to do is to learn Western science and technology. They'll be able to throw out the colonial powers and have a very happy life, eradicate all the problems of poverty, shortage of food, and this and that. Everyone will be happy. And to this end, even commentaries were written upon the Quran, including the famous commentary of an Egyptian scholar called Al-Iskandarani, obviously from Alexandria, a voluminous work called At-Tafsir al-Almi, scientific commentary, which set the tone for a large number of works that were to come out after that. And practically every single so-called Islamic reformer, every Muslim thinker who had the future of Islamic world in mind and thought they were combating the influence, the withering influence of another civilization upon the religion, it was accepted by them. When you look at the writings of Muhammad Abdo, when you look at the writings of even Sayyid Qutb, I knew Sayyid Qutb personally when I was a young man at Harvard, the head of the Harvard Islamic Society, when I was invited by the American government to come to America. One afternoon we had a big debate about this matter. Badi'uzzaman Nursi, the famous Turkish thinker whose follower Fethullah Gülen, now residing in Pennsylvania, has over 1 million followers. And I could go down the list. Even Sir Muhammad Iqbal, the most intelligent of these reformers, whom I usually call deformers, because they deformed without knowing it, the integral tradition of Islamic thought. And going down the line, they all thought that the great service they could render to Islam would be to combine Western technology with Islamic ethics. And to that end, many institutions were established. And it's not accidental that most of the extreme Islamic movements of the 20th century have arisen from people with an engineering background in the Islamic world. This is not by any means accidental. The humanities were cast aside as being irrelevant, and Western science and technology were taught, added to the Sharia with a very, very big vacuum in between. And nowhere does one see this more than in the Wahhabi world in Saudi Arabia, which for a while during the 1930s resisted, in fact, the open espousal of American and European technology. But between 1960 and 1980, we are witness to the largest transfer of technology from one civilization to another in the history of the world. What took place in the introduction of Western technology into Saudi Arabia without any intellectual resistance to what to do. In fact, there was no intellectual substance in order to resist, because everybody thought as long as you said your prayers at the right time and didn't drink wine, you were good Muslims, and the fact that everything else was coming in was something quite natural and normal. And this is not unique to Saudi Arabia. You have in the whole spectrum of Islamic thought, from the Islamic Republic of Iran to the Saudi Kingdom, from secularized Turkey to religious Sudan, and so forth and so on, everything in between, there's one common denominator, and that is a kind of worship of modern technology and science. I reside in the United States now. Therefore, I have the freedom to say things that many Muslim scholars living in the Islamic world would be afraid to say. I have made a scathing criticism in my own country of this new worship of science in place of God. Most Muslims really don't worship God, they worship modern technology. Without knowing it, unfortunately, they have the correct niyyah, they have the correct intention, but the net result is that. And that's why you get the latest gadgets of Western technology in the Islamic world so rapidly. That's why when you're circumambulating around the Kaaba, you hear cell phones ringing. And that's just something unimaginable. But that's because of this background that was established and which makes our task so much more difficult.